So we start with the introductions today. Surah 1. A short prayer placed at the beginning of the book. It was omitted by some of the early collectors and may have been placed here by the redactors. More probably, however, Muhammad intended it to stay here. You know, people jump to a lot of conclusions. They don't actually read the sources that say what went on, right? The date is uncertain, but if placed here by the Prophet himself, it probably dates from about the time of his beginning to compose the book in the year 2, or early in the year 3. Started from the beginning, actually. What orders things might be in and that sort of stuff. And there wasn't a change in decision either, so it wasn't like he looked at this and considered that and all that. Surah 2. This surah seems to have been composed mainly in the years 2 and 3, Al-Hijra, of course. It was probably intended to be the first chapter of the book which Muhammad set himself to produce, soon after his break with the Jews and his assumption of prophetic independence. The introduction dates from about that time, but has been several times revised. Earlier material was, however, utilized. The story of Adam was probably placed here, that the book, like previous scriptures, might begin with creation. We have then an appeal to the children of Israel based on their history, which by revisions becomes increasingly polemical. Then comes a series of arguments against the Jews, which towards the end includes Christians as well. We next have the adoption of the religion of Abraham, his association with the Kaaba, you know, the cube in Mecca, you know, the building, and the change of the Qibla, you know, the prayer direction, which shows the steps of Muhammad's assumption of independence, but unfortunately some of the passages are very confused. The pilgrimage was no doubt dealt with in some fashion about this time, but the Battle of Badr intervened, barring the way to Mecca, and the pilgrimage is dealt with in a very confused passage later in the surah, verse 193. Well, somebody being confused about a verse and the verse being confused is a different thing, right? The casualties at Badr occasioned a passage dealing with the state of the dead, which was later revised. 148 to 162 are the verses. Legislation occupies the greater part of the rest of the surah. These enactments are often revisions of previous deliverances and have sometimes been revised again at a still later date. Sometimes they're in the form of answers to questions or likely to be asked by his followers. Some of these are no doubt also early and were in the form of mere notes. The solid block of legislation dealing with marital relations, divorce, and widowhood probably belongs to a latter period. That it displaced some earlier deliverances on the matter is certain. How? That extraneous passage, citing the example of the children of Israel in support of fighting, verses 247 to 252, may have been occasioned by the threat of attack by the Meccans. The insistence on the contributions of the cause, verse 263, may have been stimulated by the same danger as well as by the needs of the Muslim community. A revision of earlier deliverances on usury, verse 276, and a long and probably late regulation dealing with the recording of debts, verses 282, 283, close the surah. Well, actually, verse 246 to 240. 286 to 284 to 286, I'm sorry. So the wielder of the Day of Judgment in verse 3 and Al-Fatiha is the one who has it in his power, or the possessor. And we go further into the notes. The first 4 verses are referred to, of the chapter of the cow, are referred to year 2 or 3, or maybe or revisions year 3. I don't know where that idea comes from, but the believers is the first verses that's listed, the unbelievers, the Meccans or Jews. I think it's broader than that, but verse 5 and 6, verse 7 to well, we'll see. Pretended believers, originally referring to Jews, but it's finally revised to Arab waverers in Medina. Okay. And the separated letters, no explanation can be given. There's 29 verses 29 chapters and 30 verses that start with these letters. And most of them only have the letters. Another way to translate the opening bit is to say that book, there is no doubt of it, it's guidance. And the pious acting is literally protecting yourself. And, which kind of refutes this idea of taqiyya, like it's some perpetual lying or some nonsense like that people try to say, right? And a phrase applied to those in Medina who were doubtful of Muhammad's policies was in verse 9, the diseased. And so on to verse 18 and on, we have an appeal to the worship of God, the early Medinan. The Jewish teachers mentioned are, where can I find the verse? People going apart to their satans. When people, instead of God, they concern, oh, well, what do our human authorities have to say on the subject? That's the whole point of this, right? The whole point of Revelation is to say that you don't have to believe in human interpretations. You can make your own interpretations with the material. And people causing corruption in the land injured the morale of the community. Some say they're setting things right, but they're acting uprightly is the way to translate it. And something erected, overheard, is the heaven and the dome bit. The reward of the believers is verse 23. The use of similes refer to verse 16, 24 refers back to 16. And they're from about the same time. And verse 25 and 26 and 27 are against the Jews, but not against the Jews per se, but against, that's the thing that needs to be dropped, is it's against certain beliefs and practices that the examples given were of Jews, but it's not a strike against Jews as either an ethnic group or a religion. It's, certain individuals that are doing and believing certain things. That's what it's about. The call to bring forth a certain surah, there's 9 verses. One verse has 2 mentions of surah. And the word probably comes from the surta word used to refer to scriptures in Syriac. And you protect yourself by acting piously. Brimstone is typically meant by the stones that people think, but it goes beyond that. And birth, what happens at birth? There's something that, being brought to life. But there's different types of birth, right? There's spiritual births and all sorts of stuff. So the story of Adam is verse 28 to 31. He's giving names to things. And it probably took shape at a latter period. C 38:71 and 15:28. Verse 37 was probably added when the story was placed there. Okay, so it gives names to the things. So that shamanic role, right? Iblis, verse 32. The paradise in the fall, verse 33 to 37. And the appeal, okay, that's it with that. So Genesis 2:20 is similar. And there are some passages from the Midrash that are similar, but you'll notice that the things that we can objectively prove false, or the things that would be contradictory or whatever, don't find their way into the Quran, which is, if he was composing something mixed of other sources, you figure that that problem that the Bible has of composing books from other sources and rewriting things, that it would be, you know. So the Arabic particle id is often used in the Quran to introduce an incident, but it requires a word to be supplied before it in the English. You know, so again, some things, English is very wordy, and it turns out that a lot of things it doesn't say as precisely. So there begins to be some issues with some things. The appeal to the children of Israel, the Jews, year 2, revised arrangement doubtful, and verse 42 to 41 are thought to be a scrapped, and he's acting like verse 44 to 50 is like a hostile revision. Well, where's the evidence of any editing of any portion of the Quran? It was put down right in its places, never changed in a letter as far as any manuscripts show. And there's over 500 manuscripts before the printing press of, incidences of compilations. Now there are copies based on those compilations, but the oral tradition, so the two kind of connect each other. So verse 32 relates to Iblis. 34, Satan. Well, Iblis is Satan. An indication that the different parts of the story came originally from different verses. No. Whenever a different word used doesn't mean that. And if you follow it linguistically, you kind of understand why some things would be used in some places versus others. The mutual enmity in which mankind lives is referred to by enemies to one another. Well, people make choices, right? And there's a reference lost, the prayer for it is heavy except to the humble. No, the reference isn't lost. The prayer is a weighty matter. And it's a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing for those who are not, literally great thing. If those are the people aren't spiritually minded, it's actually makes things easier, even though you're getting up 17 minutes a day, an hour. How long are you going to spend with it? The zakat listed is the tax people to the benefit of the poor and other purposes. The Data Institute tax is quite the wrong word, but it's charity. It's more right-wing than left-wing. Taxes are more left-wing. Charity is more right-wing. So the perversity of the Israelites is stressed in verse 51 to 58. And there's the verse that refers, verse 45 refers to the Christian ideas. Probably their distinction from the Jews has not been clearly realized. There's a Syriac word, perkana, salvation. The Bell origin, Jeffrey, possibly Hebrew, perakin, have influenced the use here. Well, could you say that's possibly where the word for pawn comes? Kind of like a Zoroastrian saving way? Oh, it is the word for pawn that they're referring to, is that it's a criterion. In Zoroastrianism, it refers to human saviors or incarnate saviors or something. It's not like Christianity sort of thing. It's like they set forth the saving example. They've lived the inspired life. They are the living word, as the Bible calls it. Some people say the term Lucifer and stuff like this. So it doesn't mean what some horror movie, some fiction thing means. It means, a light bringer, somebody who not only has the book in stone, but this life that imbibes it, But anyways, the Exodus 32:26 is referred to the example of the people killing each other after the incident, and Exodus 29:17 and 33:18 relate. It's the same type of reference, but the reference is to the people. So the raising up after. So 59 and 60 are thought to be at different periods according to Richard Bell here. I mean, he's following some other people's things. So the Nasara is a group that includes the Christians. The Yehud is the Yehudi was I forget the exact form here, but it's not a pun on the name Yehud. But the Jews are, it's a variation of Yahwadi, right? God follower, and referring to the tribe, and Yahdin, Yad was the earlier name before they called it Judaism. And baptizers, the Sabaean, there's a little bit more to that than that. Those going around the land causing corruption. Numbers 20 refers to that thing. Numbers 11:4 refers to the food that the people of Moses wanted in the wilderness, but they weren't getting. And it's kind of like garlic when it talks about the leeks and, the Hitta word, basically sin, but they actually, repentance was the term. We don't, not Hebrew, we're looking Aramaic, but they said hinta instead. So it's an obscure reference, but it's those who are a little bit more familiar with the Jewish sources and with the Islamic sources know what it is. Obviously, you give charity and you eat of what you're provided. Verse 60, verse 61 and 62 may be later than 60 and 61. For Parada, apes, proposes Qur'an, Perdon, vermin. Okay, Exodus 16:20. But see on 7:166. What it says in the Quran. For verses number 63 to 68, see Numbers 19:1 through 9, Deuteronomy 21:1 through 9, Mishnah Para 1:1f. The reproach may be Christian, or hence, the hardness of the hearts. And then we have reference that there's an implication of the Jews that tried to palm off a spurious scripture on Muhammad, but more probably refers to the Jewish traditional law. They tried to say that this is, our law. And more commonly, the Jews will say, well, what did the rabbis say? And that will be the instance. It's not that they're pretending that it's Torah, but they call it oral Torah. So the verse 79 may refer to Jewish intrigue with the Quraysh between Badr and Uhud, the two battles there. And Muhammad and his followers are referred to, his servant Siwileth, and made the covenant with at Sinai. We hear in rebel was a malicious reproduction in Arabic of the Hebrew Shama Nu wa Asinu. We hear and do. And the deeds at the day of resurrection, the things sent forward. And there's a clause that in verse 89 that, not 89, verse 90, that seems uneven to them, but seems to make sense to me. I don't know. Verse 94 is thought to be a scrap. And here presents verses. Possessors of previous scripture, including Jews and Christians, probably recited in the reign of Solomon, refers to rabbinic law. There was no rabbinic law then, so that's off the question. But so stuff was going on during Solomon. Not everybody was believers. And so Solomon and some other prophets got blamed for some of the stuff that was going on during their time, which wasn't of them. So that's one thing. And of course, we find a lot of Jewish tradition about seher. Magic is a kind of a weird word. It kind of doesn't have the implications that people think it does, and some other issues. But and Marduk, Harut and Marut is Marduk and the wife of Marduk, basically, in some of the earlier myths. And if you trace it linguistically, Belut, or female lord figure, but then it wasn't gendered. Before that, it wasn't gendered too. So the Quranic way of them, and the explanation of the names, well, I'll get into that more elsewhere if I haven't. And the rhyme 97 relates to 96. And wait, no, that's like 102. What's going on? As I said, the numbers are off. The order is weird. Richard Bell's kind of Unzarna is an attempt to present a Hebrew word for which the Arabics use. Okay, no, in the Quran they speak Arabic. It's all Arabic. Muhammad didn't start any of the linguistic things. That's why people could understand him. And it would kind of, if you said Muhammad wasn't even speaking Arabic to the Arabs and he was just trying to throw his word thing, and eventually people gave in. But that's easy to disprove. And why are you making up these things? I mean, anybody who says that, So the idolaters in verse 99 it hints back to verse 90. And changes may be necessary due to breaking with the Jews. The verses of the abrogation. Well, actually, the thing is that it's explained in Bukhari and Muslim. Not these people who say you don't have to follow the whole Quran or any of that stuff. Bukhari and Muslim and some of the other narrators have recorded sayings of Muhammad saying basically, some of my sayings, change some of the conditions or amend some of the conditions related to the earlier, and the Quran is does that to that. And one of the things that we find is the earlier prophets had laws of their particular place and time. Verse 102 is related to verse 63, and verse 105 is related to verse 73. But one of the things we need to remember is this excessive questioning stuff. This excessive questioning stuff is something we need to let go of, right? Because when we have something we can follow, don't make it too strict. I mean, sure, if you want to present something artistically or something, work on it, but perfect your practice as is, but don't make the obligations stricter than they are, and don't make it that way for others. The no knowledge, verse 107. So the people who don't have revealed religion. So that's why they say mushrik, because obviously mushrik is the Christians and the polytheists of the Jews. Those who think the divine feminine, like the Shekinah, is like literally the bride, or like the emanations are somehow different divinities, or they worship angels or whatever. But the mushrik is sort of like a merely a misassociator. That's the implication going on there. Verse 108 is thought not to refer to like it can't refer to the Meccans, but it could refer to the Jews because some of them assisted the Persians in their capture of Jerusalem. And see, that's the thing. When we're criticizing like Caburn conduct, when we get to that, it's not the Jews as a whole, it's only the Jews that are doing underhanded dealings to oppress and aggress people and having other people, do the armies. And some of that program has grown, but it's not the Jewish people as a whole. Honestly, the Jews get the brunt of these people. I mean, there'll be a Holocaust or something. I mean, the 30s and 40s wasn't the only Holocaust. It wasn't the only, and there were pogroms and too. But someone from someone with that title will have the thing, and they'll get away. They'll even help the people. Some of them will, and then Jewish communities destroyed for agendas of a couple of them, right? So it's not a bashing of the Jews or some nonsense like that. The change of the Kaaba is thought to be hinted at by the God having only the east, whatever direction, because that wasn't the thing. It's not about the mere outer forms. It's about obeying God, right? The unrestrictedness of God, the wideness. The Christians are an example of people who would say that God has taken offspring. But these people saying, like the Christians, like the Jews, and every comment of anything that went wrong, they need to stop with that, because obviously that's broader than that. And we go back, a little bit about the people having no knowledge. And then, of course, we refer to the judgment day as, hinting back and forth. And Millah is a form of religion. And Maltha is a word in the Syriac. And so the Millet system was a system of democracy that helped people in their religious freedom. Constitutional republic, constitutional democracy, whatever system it falls under, that's the interpretation. It seems to me that Islam is a constitutional democracy, so it's a little bit more right-wing than constitutional republic is, because a constitutional republic would be a little left of democracy. I'm not using this by political party or something. So the people of the book, some still believed in Muhammad's message. Some of the stuff they said, you got to be honest with yourself. Do I disbelieve the whole thing? No. When it comes, to referring to somebody else's religion, how can I honestly say that without? And if I fully know, I got to admit, when I talk about whatever faith that, hey, it's not all bad and evil and wrong and whatever. But anyways, 116 off to 120 something is 129, I guess. An appeal to the children of Israel repeated on a new basis, and Abraham commanded to sacrifice his son. Well, Abraham has the dream. It says Abraham was tried. So the Quran does not say that Abraham was told by God to sacrifice his son. That's an important thing. An example, an imam, there's certain contexts for the Shia that takes a different context, but Muhammad referred to the people who lead the prayer and people who lead and stuff as imam. It's given a stronger context with the prophets and such, but so we refer to the Kaaba as the house. The station of Abraham is by the Kaaba. A Haram of Mecca is a place immune from bloodshed. You're not allowed to start stuff, whatever. Just like Mount Moriah in Jerusalem is, in the Islamic view, the Islamic view is thought that way. And the Muslims were the submissive ones, submissive to God, not, not people that trample upon by others, right? Perhaps imposing the zakat on them, the purifying by almsgiving. And again, all that's a choice thing. Muslim independence is indicated in, verse 128 and onwards. In this numbering. And originally after verse 111, but revised in a progressively independent spirit, 133, 134, first 134a, 135 attached, and 130, 132 inserted in place of them. Substitutions made at the end of both. Finally, whole passage discarded in favor of 129b and 124 to 128. These latter on the back of it. They say, be Jews or Christians, and you will be guided. Say, thou, nay, the creed of Abraham, who was a Hanif, but was not one of the idolaters. I'm trying to only read the comment here. So the singular of Hanafa, the Syriac, Hanafa, heathens, the term applied to Christians, to the Arabs, via the Muslim World, volume 20, page 120. Well, the meaning doesn't mean heathens, but I guess people on a natural way, and the Christians were against natural. Take off the natural man and all this other stuff. Islam is confirming the creation as is sufficient. Some exact meaning of the word, the savor. Well, the baptism of God, the dying, like as in a cloth being dyed. And so they become Muslim. Surrendering yourself. Jacob and submission. Okay. Same thing, becoming Muslim. And the reading varies, with subject to the verb and the object. So you have some differences, the style bringing in different effects of understanding the whole thing. The change of the Qibla, we have verse 136 to 138. Rajab or Shaban, year 2, perhaps there was an interval between the dropping of the Jerusalem Qibla and the adoption of the Meccan one, during which no particular direction was prescribed. Verses 136 to 138 would belong to that interval, but possible 137 and 138b are later. Abraham and his successors were a religious community in the past, entirely distinct from Jews and Christians, just as Muslims now claim access to the grace of God independently of them. We're supposed to be stepping away from the conservative model and being direct about our religion. This concluding verse of the discarded portion is repeated in verse 128 at the end of the substitution. And a fact contained the scripture as the priority of Abraham to Moses. And the Jews and the Christians, what does it say about them? The people saying that they were witnesses, to the patriarchs, but they weren't. The direction in which the worshiper faces in prayer is the Qibla, and the appointment of the Kaaba as a Qibla, verse originally 139a, 144 private for publication, 144 was replaced by the hortatory phrase 145 to 146 written on the back of that and other discarded verses. Well, they're just not proof of these discarded verses, but finally this was replaced by 139b. And 140 may have originally followed 144, and 139b is thought to substitute for 145 to 147, and the original context uncertain for 141, and substitute 145 for 144 after 139a. And again, they're wildly speculating about composing the Quran as a book. And the former Qibla, Jerusalem, and Muhammad's message are what other might be complies is the something being recognized. And Mecca, Muhammad went forth from Mecca. So when you're out of Mecca, which again makes things an international sort of thing. Verse 143 in what we're listing here, and what Richard Bell's order, which I'm not sure which ones add up. I'm not getting clearer as I'm going with this comment, right? About the same time as verse 136, 143. 144, originally at the end of 139. The state of the dead after batter, 148, 149. And possible change of the Qibla and batter, 153. And addition after Uhud, 150 and 157 and that. But 156 and 157 were originally thought to follow a verse 149. The Jerusalem Qibla was originally offensive to the Arabs. And the Sakat being imposed, you got the reference to the way of God. Muslims don't do things just in the name of God. They figure out what the way of God is. That's the thing. A Muslim. Muslimin is the plural. 2 heights near the Safa and Marwa. Mentioned in the Bible also, but the permission here given to follow a custom. Well, the custom wasn't the disbelievers. It was the, because people get confused. It's like what's being done with Jesus or what's being done with this place or the other. There could be fully acceptable things that happened before that. The Umrah is the lesser pilgrimage. Okay, we're about halfway done. Verse 26 is related to verses 158, 159, 163, 164, 160b, 161, 162. And there's a reference to things that are falsely treated as gods, and religious leaders perhaps being mistreated as such. Because obviously there's a lot of saint worship stuff that goes on. There's some revision of, there's some earlier legislation of food being addressed, verse 167 to 169, and 163, 164. Early Medinan food verses, joined to verse 160a, 165, which is the verse about loving God more than everything else in the normal ordering, but not here. 170. I mean, how does that not relate to people messing up with the rules of the diet and that sort of thing? It definitely does. Same thing, 171. It's, and nowadays, yeah, people argue with their extra little rules about, well, some prophet had some interaction with a frog or something, so we don't eat frog. It's like, but it doesn't say, it says, especially in the Quran, that only these 5 types of things, right? So 172 was around the time of the change of the Qibla, but is here to apply to contributions, but there's no evidence of editing. Retaliation, verse 173 to 150, 175. Well, self-defense, nothing wrong with self-defense. 176 to 178 refers to wills, early thing. And the verse 170, if it connects with the preceding, may refer to the concealment of the fact that food restrictions belonging to Judaism and not to previous times. Well, that's wrong way to put it, but actually, you do find that long before Judaism and even the tribes of Israel, there were the same basic 4 or 5 things can be thought of as things that they thought was wrong to make a point of having, right? And Surah 387 refer to that later. And for the love of him, they bestow their wealth. So verse 177 in the real order. Love of him, love of it. So they give what they love for the love of God. We're not, when we say him, we're not saying that God is whatever. A follower of the way is like a son. But we're careful about our parentage sort of way of thinking. There's oral and written law, which is important to tie to what Muhammad said. which would really help with a commentary like this. 179 in this order is referred to fasting. And of course, 180, 182, 181 further on, thought to be year one for the general general ideas. But how can the rules about Ramadan be set forth in year two and then the other? People tended to fast one day a year, and that was the thing for a while, but it wasn't, wasn't laid down in this way. So it was obviously the thing about the certain number of days and stuff does refer to the Ramadan, and people would be all asking questions and whatnot. Verse 182, about asking, that obviously relates, So let the revelation come. Don't rush to judgments about what's to be done with it. Find out what it is, right? Find out the right recitation of the Quran. Just allow yourself to listen. Sometimes you have a question and it follows with the next passage or whatever. Using up your wealth in vanity is, gambling is a perfect example of that sort of stuff going on. Nothing, your wives are a covering and a comfort for you. The new moons, the viewing of the waxing crescent, talks about that. 185 in this one, fighting before Hudaybiyah. 186, 190 is thought to have been followed by 186, and 187 to 189 are thought to be before the final expedition against Medina. 191 refers to contributions of some sort, and the pilgrimage before Badr, revised at various dates. 192a, and then so the dissension, so the persecution is a dissension. The mountain near Mecca, the bounty, the taking part in trade is the seeking bounty. Arafat is a mountain near Mecca. Visit on the second day of the pilgrimage. You got to be there on the 9th, by the way. The sacred monument said to be placed on the eastern side of Muzdalifah. And, of course, then there's the reference to the animal of sacrifice. And 196 and 199, it's thought to continue 193. 200 and 203 refer to the Jews between the battle Badr and Uhud. Verse 204, the unity replacing 212, of which the beginning has been retained between Badr and Uhud. The pilgrimage usually occupies 3 days, so the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th. The required bits of it are there. Pride takes them with the guilt. Be humble. Be pleased, but you don't have to be proud. The bond of peace is usually interpreted as resignation, but the verse is an appeal for unity amongst the Prophet's followers. 206 to 208 is thought to be unconnected scraps, but again, listen to things in Arabic. Later edition, 209. Yeah, they're just presuming it's like the Bible and trying to form orders and suppositions of, well, not the whole thing, even if it's said that people went off and learned the whole thing all at once. But 210 is thought to continue 205, 204 is thought to be continued at 212 and such, and 211 is thought to contribute to the whole thing. 215 to 218, they're not sure what they're going to make of that. The sacred months is referred to in 214, and there was an Arab game, the Maysar, but actually it's the games of chance, not just gambling, but games of chance altogether. Now, if you use your skill to interpret symbols and stuff, that's something kind of different, I guess. But the redundant, what you don't need is what's being asked to the charity. Now, you got to know the difference between need and want. And the hereafter, that's thought to be unconnected phrase. Okay, in this world and hereafter. Okay. Including phrase of 214 written at the foot of the scraps. However, when the rhyme phrase of 214 was added, it was crowded in at its proper place. Okay. Verse 172 is thought to relate to the follower of the way part. Oh, well, it's the same thing. Marriage in verse 220 and this and 221 is referred to here. Menstruation, verse 222. Hey, that's the right one. Marital intercourse, verse 223. Breaking off marital relations, 226, 227. Oaths in general, 224 and a bit. Of course, we have hints at the judgment, sending forward something for yourself. And also in regards to one's wives, right? You provide for your wives and, it's really for you, right? Whether she's taking care of herself or your children. Yeah. And of course, think the women and related to whatever. Divorce, possibly the same date as 224. So 228 to 232. So, you refer to the, women aren't supposed to conceal their pregnancy. And the waiting period, not only for health reasons that we find out nowadays, but it also leaves a possibility of the divorce not being, their total separation, right? But it's actually best to have a waiting period at the end of which you decide whether to divorce. That's one of the reasons why some rules are set, right? A 3-month separation before deciding on divorce, that's, mentioned. But but if you're going to actually have the divorce, not just the separation of how long before you're required to divorce was the question. But it's not good to do the threefold divorce at once. And a lot of people will say that doesn't count as 3 divorces, it counts as 1. But to be careful, you don't triple pronounce a single divorce, right? Of course, we refer to the second husband and that sort of thing. There's suckling of the children in 233, 234, and 235. We refer to widows. And the women's relatives shouldn't interfere with the marriage from coming about or being reconciled and that sort of stuff. The Muslim community should help in people being moral and that sort of thing. I mean, not some of the standing over with a whip or whatever people think. That's not what we're talking about. There's prayers in war, but actually it goes beyond that. What the middle prayer is, verse 4, the divorce while the marriage is still unconsummated is referred to 237, 238. So the late afternoon prayer, the early afternoon prayer, the dawn prayer are 3 options for the middle prayer, but also there's the esoteric one of the inner side of the prayer. So verse 228 and is thought by some to be discarded in favor of 242 and 243. 234 is thought to be discarded in favor of 241 in some places, but you can follow the whole Quran if you have the means for that particular instance. So these arguments are bunk, really. And usually interpreted, the husband may give more than half, but it probably refers to the woman's guardian. Now, the women have the rights over their property regardless. So there's no bridal price. You don't have to pay the family to marry the woman. Islam does not require that. Some countries, the marriage may be Islamic, but you may have to pay a bribe to the family. That's what somebody told me, that we should go somewhere and get you married, and I'll pay the bride price for you. The bride price. Well, some parts of the world you have to pay the family for the privilege of marrying their daughter, and you have to pay the woman for the dowry sort of insurance, you could say. But fighting inculcated by the example of the Israelites, and 247, the resurrection, 244, fighting, 245, contributions, 246, 253, 254, previous messengers, 248, and so on. We'll find out how far that goes. You know, you have a united band, you know, the dwellings in the thousands, the story kind of unknown, although we can refer certain things. Samuel and Goliath and all that stuff. We're using Arabic terms and we're using a little bit different, but Saul was Talut. And then we go on, the all-sustaining is God. The Hebrew Shekinah in the Quran is Sakina. So the sense of assurance is also referred that there was angelic presence and a lot of stuff that kind of gives it the same meaning, right? And the story of Gideon is thought to relate there. The Bible has 3 people kill a Goliath, so it's kind of silly to go into that. 255 is, of course, the best verse in the Quran. 256 kind of relates to why, and the word tagut kind of refers to the whole idol things. And it's thought that David's referred to here in whatever he would in the middle of that story. And we go on further. The story with Nimrod, no source of the story. I don't know quite about that. Nimrod is a term less than an individual, right? Nimrod. And then there's a story about, you know, the 100-year and the donkey, that sort of thing. It can relate to Ezekiel's vision of chapter 37, and the story of Baruch. The Quran refers to a lot of things. Verse 268 explains, 266. Allah's gift is the best. 273, that, you know, that referred to the usury, this section here. Contributions, 269. Well, that kind of goes back, I guess, a bit, because they're dividing the passages here for some odd reason. There's an uncertain sense in his mind, but incline them to thyself. So see, Abraham, the birds were supposed to attach to him, and therefore they came calling. So yeah, how that was done, whatever. Genesis 15, verse 9 is thought to be referred to amongst some of this stuff, and others, verse 266 to 268, can be referred to Matthew 7:24 and 13:3, and perhaps Isaiah 5:1. And the destination of the contributions, 274b to 275. Usury, referred to again here. Next, 276 and such. He causes the joins 273b, and obviously you got to regard the judgment, and sometimes Satan joins in the bad deeds, right? And usury referred to again, 278, 200, and the recording of debts, the late verse, and to God belongs, and then it kind of drops off. But, you know, the verse that summarize the couple verses you say before going to sleep, that are the last 2 verses of the chapter, that disappears. And